Alright guys, welcome back to another MCreator procedure tutorial. So today what we're going to be looking at is a couple different blocks, and if we go under Minecraft components, right at the top here we have event/target entity, source entity, immediate source entity, and entity iterator. So we're going to be looking at these blocks here today. The first one is the most common one. You can find that as a entity dependency. So if we go ahead and try printing this out right now using a print block, what will happen is you can see that it will have a entity dependency. So this is the most common block that you'll be using when you're working with entities themselves. There are other blocks in here that we are not going to be covering today. Many of them are under the entity data, and they will use a lot of these core blocks like the get entity, and then the event/target entity is writing, and then there's a few other ones. There's more further down as well. There's also a few other ones like the nearest entity. This is one that you can also use. And we will be covering some of the ones from the world procedure one, which is the entity/iterator. So these blocks here basically allow you to test for every entity within what it's basically doing. So we'll get into that in a little bit. So when you were working with source entity, it's the opposite entity from what the event/target entity is. As you can see, it has a source entity dependency. So this one's a little bit different than what you would expect. It's only supported with a very select few procedures, and it's usually the opposite entity that is basically the one that our main entity that's having the entity attack. The easiest way to determine which is the source entity and the event/target entity is to basically print out the value, and then it will give you the name of the entity, so basically the type. So if it's like an entity that is hurt, then you would print out one of these values, and it would tell you either pig or server player or player or whatever, and then that will give you an idea which one is which. There is no really best way to go about it. They're not listing what entity is which, because obviously we don't know which one. But for example, with the entity hurt, source entity would be the entity that is attacking, and the event/target entity is the one that is actually being attacked. So hopefully that makes sense. This will vary depending on procedure, the procedure trigger and stuff like that. So keep that in mind when you're actually working with these blocks. So there is the other one, which is the immediate source entity. This one's only used with projectiles. So if we go under projectiles, we can just quickly go to the triggers tab, and you can see that we have immediate source entity on a lot of these triggers here, all four of them actually. So basically you can use that one there, and it will have a different effect on the entity that it's selecting. Some of these also support source entity and entity as well. A lot of them actually support entity. So you can kind of mess with that. That I think has to do with the projectile itself or the entity that it will be hitting. One of the two that it will actually happen. I'm not sure which one it is. You'll have to print out the value in order to know which one's which. And then our last one under the Minecraft components is the entity iterator. So this one's actually really useful in some of the procedures. So if we go under actions for world procedures, and if we want to test for every entity that's around in a specific area, we can do that using something like this. So basically, entity iterator will allow us to specifically print out the value of each entity that is run in that area. So for example, we can run this and test this in game, and this will print out every entity within a 5-block radius from where the trigger is happening. And the reason why I say 5 is this is a cubic size. So basically the full diameter of the block, where 5 blocks would be the radius of where the event would be taking place. So you would just use the entity iterator. You can also use the other blocks in here as well, like event/target entity and source entity if it's supported. But this one doesn't actually have any dependencies, as you can see, because it's built into the trigger itself. So let's go ahead and test this out, and we'll print out the value of each entity that's within a certain area. And I can kind of show you how to debug the source entity and the event/target entity. All right, so first things first, let's go ahead and clear our console so we can know which values we're going to have in here. And we're going to just make sure that we're within a 5-block radius. We should be fine here if we stand right here, and we'll hit the entity. And we got a whole bunch of entity information right at the top there. So for example, if we go ahead and minimize that, we can see that we have a pig, which has the coordinates of x9.44, 60, 7, or yeah, 7, 14. And there's a second pig down here, which is with a different coordinate. So this one's at 8.45, 60, and 793. So those are 2 pigs that we have in that pen. And then we also have a server player, because this trigger is only running on server side. So we're basically going to be printing out server player, not the or not the regular player, which the regular player is just client side, where the server player is going to be affecting for everyone. So basically that. And if we go back to console, we can see that we also have the sheep in here as well. So basically what we did was we printed out every entity that this block cycled through within a 5-block radius of where the event took place. Now, because we are in game and all the entities are within a 5-block radius here, that basically works. So the event/target entity, if you need to print out a specific value, you can determine which entity is which by basically the first word of the console printout. So for example, this one is pig, this is server player, so player in this case, and then we have pig and a sheep. So those are all the different entities. So when you're running your script, you can isolate it like I did with the super flat world, or not super flat, yeah, the super flat world, and then it's a void world here. And you can basically just attack an entity or have the trigger basically run, and then you'll know which one is basically which. So in this case, you would print out like either event/target entity or source entity, one of the two, and then you could check console like we did here, and it will tell you which one is which. So the opposite entity would be basically the one that would be the other one that you selected. So hopefully this makes sense. If you're new to my channel, don't forget to subscribe, comment down below, rate the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching. Peace out.